First, the chairman of the Florida Republican Party has a problem with the president delivering a speech next week to school children to kick off the new school year. Jim Greer says the speech is an attempt to, quote, spread Obama's socialist ideology and to use students, quote, as tools to spread liberal propaganda. Let's talk to this gentleman, Florida Republican Party Chairman Jim Greer. He's going to be here in a minute. Second, President Obama's address before a joint session of Congress next week could well be his loudest hurrah on health care so far. He's been under fire for not providing enough details of his own and for leaving the job to Congress. But now he plans to be more detailed, more prescriptive, if you will, of what he once included in the plan. Will he scale back on his focus on public options, or will he be able to get moderate Democrats and a couple of Republicans aboard? Democratic Congresswoman Jan Schakowsky of Illinois and Republican Congressman Chris Smith of New Jersey will be here to discuss what they want to hear from the president. Also, we've got a bootleg copy of Ted Kennedy's memoir. His words are far more personal, far more candid, and more confessional, if you will, than we've heard from him over the years. And he didn't shy away from the low points in his life. It's really an impressive book. It includes discussions about Chappaquiddick and the tragedies of his brother's assassinations. We'll get to all that and his revelations with a Kennedy biographer here tonight. And speaking of Ted Kennedy, Massachusetts Attorney General Martha Coakley is the first person to jump into the race to fill Kennedy's seat. She'll be here tonight to answer the kind of questions, hardball questions, a senator has to answer. And finally, who's the Hollywood celebrity people would most like to see in the Congress? Interesting result coming your way tonight on Hardball. That's in the sideshow. Let's start with the attacks on President Obama's speech next week to school children. Jim Greer is the chairman of the Republican Party in Florida. He joins us right now. Mr. Greer, thanks for coming on. You put out a pretty strong statement the other day. You said the president, you referred to him as the Pied Piper Obama. Pied Piper is a guy who took children away and they were never seen again. Is that what you think? I mean, really?
Well, I don't want him to take children away, but I don't want him to take their minds away either to push his agenda. I'll tell you, Chris, as a parent, I want to know what my kids are going to be taught, what they're going to be exposed to in the school system. And when I saw and heard about this speech and saw the lesson plans that the White House was preparing that talked about, what can you say good about President Obama's initiatives, new ideas, things of that nature, that concerned me as a parent, as an American. And before anybody talks to my children from a political perspective, I want to know what they have to say.
Well, according to the White House, and then we can argue about this, you may believe they're dishonest, but they put out a statement, the White House, saying, first of all, the president's entire speech is going to be made public next Monday, and any teacher that doesn't want his or her students to hear it won't have to hear it. Number two, it's going to deal with the importance of taking personal responsibility for your success in school. That strikes me as kind of a Bill Cosby conservative, get your act together speech. It doesn't sound like what you call liberal propaganda, does it? Does that sound like liberal propaganda to you? Well, that's what the speech is going to be about.
Well, how do we know that until they decided to tell us?
Well, why do you think it's about something else?
Well, up until yesterday, the talking points that teachers were given across this country dealt with writing a letter, how can I help President Obama?
Yeah, I know.
President
But there
Obama's
wasn't anything in there about health care. There wasn't in there about health care, all the other stuff.
Well, last night they scrambled after parents across this country became concerned, and they changed their website. They took all that information out. Yeah. It's no longer out there. And now they've decided they are going to release the text, where yesterday they were saying they weren't. Okay. I think this is good, but I think it did, Chris, substantiate my concern and parents' concerns that President Obama may go into the policy discussion areas, and that's not what children should hear.
I agree
when they
with
go
you.
To school.
The question is, were you right in assuming he was going to use this as a pulpit to push his politics? And I agree with you, he shouldn't do it with students. And I also agree with you, whatever person, I'm not going to use an adjective, at the education department said, we're going to ask the students to help figure out how they can help the president, doesn't sound right to me. But here's my point. I think if he's going to talk about how to get kids to talk about personal responsibility for staying in school and doing their homework, here's what he said just a couple of months ago to the NAACP. And I was so impressed with it. And if this is what he's going to talk about, I think even you would agree it's a good lesson. Here he is.
We've got to say to our children, yes, if you're African American, the odds of growing up amid crime and gangs are higher. Yes, if you live in a poor neighborhood, you will face challenges that somebody in a wealthy suburb does not have to face. But that's not a reason to get bad grades. That's not a reason to cut class. That's not a reason to give up on your education and drop out of school. No one has written your destiny for you. Your destiny is in your hands. You cannot forget that.
Mr. Greer, that strikes me as kick-ass as Bill Cosby is. It's get off your butt, do your job, and stop complaining. That doesn't strike me as what you call liberal lies or liberal propaganda. It doesn't.
Well, listen, I think that the president should have an opportunity to motivate children, to encourage them to stay in school. But this president has been aggressive and very vocal on his vision of America. His vision of America, where government does everything for us as citizens, is not mine.
You think he's going to? You don't have any evidence that he was going to do that.
That's not what he's going to say.
But you're arguing against something there was no evidence he's going to do it.
When they put out teaching plans, Chris, they put out teaching plans with things in it that talk about, how can I help President Obama? Well, the only way you can help President Obama is to promote his liberal agenda, his socialist agenda.
Fair enough.
So before President Obama talks to my kids, I want him to go through her parents.
That was a line.
First.
That was a boneheaded line that some bureaucrat put in there, and I can't believe it wasn't caught by some politically smart person, because it's directly aimed at you, so you could beat the hell out of them with it. And fair enough, that's politics. You don't have a problem with presidents addressing students, though, do you, per se?
No, not at all. As long as they don't talk
President
about
Bush, you won. And let me ask you about the president. Do you have a problem? I want to know how far out your party is down there. Do you have a problem with his legitimacy as president?
No, not at all. I think Floridians respect the office of the presidency. I think, Florida does things a little differently under Charlie Crist, where our government is problem solvers. And I think at the end of the day, we're all Americans, but there's a difference in philosophy, certainly in Florida. We believe in less government, less taxes, more freedom. And when you look at President Obama's vision, he believes in more government, and more government.
You know what? You sound like a reasonable person. Did you write this statement? This statement said he's going to be a Pied Piper. In other words, take our kids away, we'll never see him again. You accuse him of liberal propaganda. You call him liberal lies. You got lines in here like this is propaganda. Did you write this, or some staffer of yours? I think you got to be accountable for your staffers too. Did you really write this yourself with a typewriter?
I think everybody should be accountable. And
did you write this with a typewriter, sir? Did you, Mr. Greer? I think you're very impressive on the air. Did you write this yourself, or did some staffer write it?
I had a lot to say about what was in it, and I approved it optimally, so it's my statement.
Okay, great. Thank you very much. You're nice to come on. Thank you very much, Mr. Greer. Your first name is?
Jim.
Jim Greer. And I, by the way, I agree with you about Charlie Crist. I think he's a hell of a public servant. I dare to say he's a moderate Republican, but that would probably get him in trouble down there. Thank you very much for joining us.
Republican.
Thank you very much for joining us tonight, Mr. Greer, Mr. Jim Greer.